Just before the clock chimes midnight on New Year's Eve, a 16-year-old grabs his brother's assault rifle and sets out to gun down his childhood bully. But at the last minute, he changes his mind. He doesn't want to kill that kid. He wants to eliminate his entire family. You could say he was obsessed with the idea. In a seaside New Jersey town called Long Branch, Scott Kologi made a horrifying New Year's resolution. December 31st, 2017 was a cold night. Snow and ice painted the neighborhood lawns white. Against that backdrop stalked an eerie figure. 16-year-old Scott, dressed like a comic book villain, complete with a black leather jacket, sunglasses, and an automatic weapon propped up against his shoulder. Inside their cozy duplex, his family was celebrating the end of the old year and the beginning of a new one. Everyone was there. His mother Linda, his dad Steve, his grandfather Adrian, and his girlfriend Mary Schulz. His 18-year-old sister Brittany, his older brother Stephen Jr., and his brother's girlfriend. They were all laughter and smiles. They had no idea what, or should I say who, was coming for them. 15 minutes before the ball dropped and fireworks lit up the sky, Scott was back upstairs with earplugs in. 2 magazines loaded with 30 bullets were at the ready. When his mother came up with party favors to coax him out of his room to ring in the new year with the family, he unleashed hell. At the end of it, only his grandfather, his older brother, and his brother's girlfriend were still alive in the house. Within hours, he was in police custody. He told detectives how he turned out the light in his bedroom so his mother couldn't see what he was going to do. If she could look into his eyes while he extinguished her life, maybe he would have snapped out of it. As it was, he shot her 5 times in the torso. When his dad came running, he shot him in the back over and over. He just kept firing until they stopped moving. Then he stepped over his father's body and went downstairs to the kitchen where he shot his older sister 3 times in the face and chest. But he still wasn't finished. The next to die was his grandfather's 70-year-old girlfriend. They'd been together for so long the kids called her Grandma. Scott shot her 4 times. Why did he do it? He couldn't say, but when police asked him why he stopped, he said because he was way too tired and he couldn't be totally sure he wouldn't do it again. He seemed to be fixated on his brother's gun. He admitted that he had taken it out and touched it several times over the year before the murders. And he watched how-to videos on YouTube to learn how to use it. Earlier that night, he'd been reading about the 2017 London terrorist attacks. He also checked whether bullets from an AK-47 would penetrate a bulletproof vest, indicating he was expecting the SWAT team to swarm. In the aftermath, his grandfather and his older brother were left to grapple with the pain and confusion. His brother was in the room while the detectives interviewed him, but when he had to listen while he calmly discussed murdering their parents, he got emotional. His face was a mask of sadness and anger. And while police escorted Scott to the bathroom, he put his head in his hands and cried before standing up and throwing something across the table. Scott's grandfather couldn't stand to be in the same room. In an interview with New Jersey's 101.5, he said, "Last time I saw him, he was at the police station. I walked down the hallway and he turned around and yelled out, 'I love you, Grandpa.' And I just ignored him." He had a strange way of showing love. He talked a lot about killing, had for years, but mostly they didn't think he was serious. His mother would say, "You wouldn't hurt me." And he'd say, "I have to." And then Dad next because he would be sad without you. His sister would have to die because he hated her, and his brother would too because he would be left without parents. And as we know all too well, that's almost exactly how it played out. Scott's mental health issues included a history of hallucinations, autism, and distorted thinking, according to NBC New York. But despite his struggles, he knew his thoughts were taking him down a dark path. He begged his mother to let him talk to a therapist about his bad thoughts, but she said no because she didn't want him taken away from her. She was devoted to him. He was 15, but he still slept in his parents' bed every night, just like he'd done his whole life. His mother laid out his clothes every morning and made him special meals because he was a picky eater. His aunt used to rent a room in their basement, and she lived there along with her husband for $500 a month. They were a tight-knit family, but as time went on, she worried about the frightening things her nephew was saying. And she tried, but she couldn't force her sister to get him help. In fact, Linda threatened that if she told anyone about his homicidal urges, she would throw her out. A few months before the massacre, Scott threatened his aunt, pointing a revolver game piece at her during a game of Clue, saying he was going to kill her, then kill his parents. As for her husband, Scott said he'd let him go home to his own family. His aunt confronted his mother again, but she wasn't having it. She told her, "Not only will you be put out, but you will never see my kids again." So that was the end of that. Despite the clear danger, she kept quiet. She was afraid her sister would never talk to her again. So they moved out because it was getting harder to keep quiet. And she wasn't the only one who seemed to have a sense of foreboding. Text messages between family members came out during the trial. It was plain everybody in the family knew Scott was homicidal. His grandfather said all he talked about was killing people. He was worried he was losing it. And when he told his son and daughter-in-law that their son was obsessed with killing, Scott got angry at him for snitching. His defense team says Scott finally lost it. In technical terms, as the Asbury Park Press reported, they claimed he was, quote, legally insane and experiencing a severe psychotic episode after suffering for years from mental illness for which he was never treated. A psychotic break that ended with hundreds of people from the community dressed in their winter coats and knit hats gathered for the funeral of the Kologi family. But not everyone believed Scott didn't know what he did. The prosecution's experts testified that learning to use the gun, loading it, setting out to kill that night were all actions that pointed to one thing. He knew exactly what he was doing. And in February 2022, after weighing the testimony of police and experts on both sides, the jury rejected his insanity plea and found him guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 150 years behind bars. Thanks for letting me catch you up on this case, but don't go away. More recaps are coming up right now, and if you like getting all the crime in half the time, please remember to tap subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, take care.